Hello and welcome back to Transformation Tuesday. I am Chris Jackson and I'm excited because tonight I'm bringing you an incredible episode on how to plan to maximize your productivity. Sounds pretty sexy, right? Productivity is what it's all about. Productivity is the name of the game. Productivity is how we earn more money, how we get more done, how we leave a greater impact, how we leave a legacy. Productivity is how we actually make the invisible, how we make the intangible tangible. It's how we create, it's how we influence, it's how we express what we are. So we need to be productive in order to have an impact in this world, and that's just the reality of life. So I'm here to share with you how do we use planning, specifically planning, to be more productive, to get more done, to maximize our productivity, to maximize our impact. Good to see you here, Mike, John. I'm doing very, very well. Thank you. Welcome back. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing with you just why planning is so important. And again, this is one of the key things that I wish I got taught when I first got into this game. I didn't recognize just how important planning was. It's vital to the success of anyone, any human being. It doesn't matter whether you're a business owner, entrepreneur, professional, career, whether you want to have a successful life, a successful relationship. It doesn't matter what you want to do in life. Planning is a core skill you simply must master. You simply have got to know how to plan, because when you master planning, you start to master your life. So I'm going to be sharing with you the best of what I've learned of how to get more from your day, more from your life, how to be more productive. And as I said, being productive is how we create impact in this world. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about earning more money, having a greater quality of relationship, just simply getting more done in your day and getting more time back to spend your life, your very precious life, how you want. This is a core skill. So let's get into it. As I said, planning is a core skill. It is a skill set. And for a lot of people, it doesn't come naturally. So if you don't resonate with planning, or it kind of sounds a little bit geeky and a little bit like, oh, can't we just get on with getting it done? Well, the best example that describes why planning is important is, let's look at if you were to design and build a house. If you're going to build a house, you're not going to design and build a house just randomly by walking up to your block of land and just start pouring some concrete, maybe get the hammer and nails out and just start banging stuff in and start erecting steel work. You're just not going to do it. You're going to have a plan. You're going to probably go and see an architect. You're going to see an engineer. You're going to have a design. Hey, Angela, good to have you back here. You're going to have a design, and you're going to work out what's the end game. What do you want this thing to look like? What's its purpose? So the same goes for life. If we want to have the most magnificent, the most empowered, the most incredible life ever, we've got to reverse engineer it. We need to know, well, what's the outcome? What's the purpose? What are we actually looking to create? And then work our way back and create a plan, create a strategy, create a series of tasks, activities, such that we can implement and execute this project, which is our life or our business, such that it's deliberately constructed, so that it's not ad hoc, it's not done randomly, and it's all very deliberate, methodical, and laid out. Now, for some of you might be thinking, oh, that doesn't really sound very sexy, or it doesn't sound very exciting. Some of you might be thinking, great, this sounds amazing, bring it on. Now, there are some personality types, some people that are more susceptible to loving the planning process than others. For me, I love planning. Like my archetype is a engineer, a designer, a planner. I've got a very strong, rational, logical part of my brain, which means I like to see things. I like to see timelines. I like to see projects, and I can see dots connecting. I like to be able to see all that in front of me. If I don't see that, I get confused. I get lost. I get stuck. So for some of you guys that also maybe get lost or stuck, or feel like maybe you've got goals but you haven't actually achieved the goals you want in the time that you've wanted to, planning is going to be one of these things that's certainly going to help you. It doesn't matter what level of success or what level of productivity you're on. When you master the skill of planning, it accelerates your results incredibly. And the studies that Brian Tracy International did on planning was that for every 1 minute that you invest in planning, you gain 10 minutes on the back end in an increase in productivity. Now, they found that I don't know how they discovered that, but by doing testing, measuring, and looking at different scenarios, they come up with that 10-to-1 ratio. So All that's required is you invest, let's look at it, 10 minutes at the beginning of your day to then get back a saving of 100 minutes of lost productivity. I think that's a pretty good return on investment. So this is how we need to approach our life, our business. We need to get very, very tactical, and we need to start to hack our whole experience to get the most out of life. Because if we're not hacking our life, if we're not approaching this very tactically, well, we're not going to get the results that we want. We're not going to be able to create the life that we want. And this is what it's about. It's about hacking our reality. It's about making sure that what we're doing in life is deliberate. It's intelligent, right? We want to get more done. This isn't about hustle more, work harder. Well, if you're not already working at your maximum, there's a lot of people that are already at maximum that are trying to push the accelerator even harder down, but they're already revving the engine at maximum RPM. So this isn't, for a lot of people, this is not about working harder. This is about getting smarter, being more tactical, being more strategic, and being able to leverage your time and your efficiency to get more done. So let me go into some of these strategies about how do we actually plan. So first of all, start by saying, well, what is planning? Well, planning is a process where you actually sit down and you have a strategy about how you're going to use your time. How are you going to approach all your tasks? How are you going to approach your projects? How are you going to approach your day, your week, your month, your quarter, your year? So we need to be looking at our timeframes. We need to be looking at our core projects. We need to be looking at our key responsibilities. What are our priorities? We need to start to get tactical with how do we reverse engineer everything we're creating in life. And this is the plan. So just like with the house plan, when you engineer, you architect, when you design a house plan, you now have a blueprint. You have a blueprint for what you're wanting to create. Well, we need to do the same thing with our life, with our day, our week, our month, and our year. So let me share with you the principles behind this and how to do it. So how to plan. First of all, what I recommend that you really focus on is just recognizing what we focus on is what we get. So if we focus on planning, if we focus on being more productive, we will get more productive. So if you notice that productivity is something you want to improve, by you focusing on it, you're going to improve your skill set in this area. So by you attending this episode right now, by listening and paying attention, and hopefully taking some implementation action notes and what you're going to apply, you're now going to improve your productivity. You're going to improve your ability to manage your time because you're now focusing on it. So this is a core principle, is what you focus on is what you get. What you focus on is what you get. So where focus goes, energy flows and results show. What you focus on is what you're going to create more of. So if you know you have a gap in this area, I'd highly recommend this is something that you prioritize and you put on your agenda to master, because by mastering it, you're going to save so much time. As I said, just simply by investing in every minute you invest in planning, you gain 10 minutes back on the back end of gained productivity, of not making mistakes, of not executing in the wrong sequence. And it's like if you were to start just building your house without a plan, then you're going to make a whole lot of mistakes. Oh, we poured the concrete in the wrong spot. We're going to have to rip that out. Or we put the wall in the wrong spot. We put the door in the wrong spot. We're going to have to pull that out. Oh, there's no windows on the front. We're going to have to demolish the building and start again. So you can get, by being tactical and very methodical in how you approach your projects, your life, your business, and by executing things in the right sequence with a complete, and I'll get into this in more detail, but completely focused in your energy with no distractions, your productivity goes through the roof. You can double, quadruple, 10x your productivity so easily, and you'll see how when I get into these details. So let me share these with you, because these are so important. These are so cool. The first aspect that we need to make sure that we're actually doing before we approach any of this is getting clear on what are our goals, what are our purpose, what are the outcomes we're looking to achieve. Because if we're not even clear on what's our outcome, then how do we even know where to begin? How do we even know that we're even pointing in the right direction? There's a lot of people that they don't even ask themselves, what are my goals? What am I even striving for? They don't even know what the end game is, and they've jumped straight on their computer. They've just jumped into their email. They're just in distraction mode already. So before we do any of this, you've got to get super clear on what are your goals? What are your outcomes? What are you looking to create? What's your agenda for your life, for your business? What is the end? What is, as Stephen Covey said, start with the end in mind. So this needs to be the frame through which we apply to everything that I'm about to say, everything I'm about to share with you. It's got to be, what's the outcome? Always, that's got to be the most important question. You're always asking, what's my outcome? What's my outcome? So you don't get lost and just sucked into the process. You've got to ask, what is my outcome? First up, we need to have an approach, a system for planning. So we need to have, and this is what I recommend that we have. I recommend that you have a diary. And when I say a diary, there's so many different approaches to this, but I recommend at least starting with this and trialing this, get yourself a planner. Get yourself a 90-day planner. Now, get yourself a planner that has a daily time frame as well as notes on the side. There's some pretty amazing planners out there. There's a Best Self Planner. There's Brendon Burchard's High Performance Planner. There's a lot of different planners out there that are really, really good. I recommend getting yourself there's a Full Focus Planner as well. That's the one that I'm currently using. I've tested and measured a few different planners. Full Focus Planner is really, really powerful as well. Get yourself a 90-day planner and use it. So you now have a hard copy of what is your plan in your life. Now you can use that to plan your year, your quarter, your month, your week, and your year. And that's the time frame that I recommend that you actually look at planning your life. Use those time frames to say, rightio, a year from now, where do I want to be? What are my goals from a year from now? What are my quarterly goals for this quarter, for the next 3 months? What are my monthly goals? What are my weekly goals? And what are my daily goals or tasks or activities? So that's the way I recommend you approach planning from a time frame perspective. And I recommend that you actually book in all of those planning schedules, all those planning meetings with yourself in your calendar in a year in advance. So for me, for example, I've already got my yearly planning booked in for the end of this year. I've got my quarterly planning booked in for Bali, where myself and my team are going to Bali and we're spending a week in Bali to do our quarterly planning. So we've already booked it in, we've already scheduled it, it's happening. So I don't have to think about it because I already know that's when I'm planning. I do my weekly planning on a Sunday afternoon. I have an hour where I've set aside on a Sunday afternoon exactly everything that I'm doing everything I'm focusing on for the coming week. And I know that that's my Sunday afternoon. That's what I do on my Sunday. Every evening, what I do is I plan my next day. So I have about half an hour where I plan my next day the night before. Now again, the reason why we're doing this planning is for every 1 minute invested in your planning, you gain back 10 minutes of time that you would have wasted because you're inefficiently executing things in the wrong sequence or without actually thinking about it properly. So that's the first perspective I wanted to give you around planning. Yes, I also recommend that you consider using some electronic planning systems. Myself and my team, we use a program called Asana. Asana is an online project management platform. Now what that lets us do is it lets us tag team members. We can add tasks, we can create projects, we can create deadlines, we can put due dates, we can tag accountabilities of who's doing what on what date. And then we can see the flow through of first of all, my PA, she needs to do that. Then that needs to go to the graphic designer. The graphic designer then needs to pass it on to, for example, with a podcast. We've just done a podcast as a project. And you might just think, how are we going to deliver a podcast? Well, podcast has about 20 different elements. It's got registering your podcast show name. It's got creating the artwork. It's got creating the music. It's got the sound over guy that's going to speak over the top of it. We've got developing all the episodes. So we've got all these elements that need to go into a project. What we now do is we can map all of these elements into little mini projects, and there we go. A podcast as a whole entire project now gets broken down to 20 smaller elements. So this is the first fundamental principle, is break your projects down into tiny chunk sizes. Right? If you're looking at a huge project, unless you break it down into smaller elements, it will lead to overwhelm. It will lead to frustration. It will lead to, how are we going to do this? So the key to this is to chunk down into the detail and then schedule when you want to do each of those elements in a time. Otherwise, if you don't schedule it, it won't happen. You've got to use your calendar like your secret weapon. You have to, and this is what I recommend you do, you treat lots of these little tasks, lots of these projects like appointments. It's almost like you schedule an appointment with yourself, and kind of like when you schedule a dentist appointment, that's when you turn up and that's when you have the appointment. Well, you can do the same thing with yourself. You can schedule appointments with yourself and you can create artificial deadlines. I recommend creating artificial deadlines throughout your whole entire week, your month, and your year, not because it's due on any particular date, but just pick a date, because that's going to force you to create some internal pressure and put some pressure on yourself to get it done. It's going to create some accountability. So these are some philosophies in and around how to plan, how to approach your planning, and some of the platforms that you can use. So as I said, you can use Asana, you can use a diary. I recommend using diaries like these types of things in terms of just taking notes, just documenting your life, reviewing your life. This is all part of planning as well. Your reviewing of your own performance at the end of the day. That is planning. Admittedly, it's reflective planning, but what it now does is by you reflecting on your day and your performance, how did I perform? How did I go? Where was I distracted? Where was I out of alignment? And I call this my misalignment journal. When you create awareness of where you're out of alignment, you can now implement and course correct the next day. So your learning becomes instant. Your learning becomes exponentialized. It accelerates to such a point because you're now instead of reviewing your life once a year, you're now reviewing your day every single day and applying and implementing the learnings. So again, planning now falls under the category of performance enhancement, giving yourself feedback. Feedback's incredibly important. You want to give yourself feedback daily. You want your team to give you feedback. Feedback, as corny as it sounds, is the breakfast of champions. Feedback is the way you can evolve and expand yourself into becoming the greatest, most authentic, most empowered version of you. So crave feedback. Go looking for feedback. How do I get better? Ask the questions like, if I was to do my day over, how would I do it differently? So this is a core function of planning, is reviewing our performance. How did we go? So as I said, you can use a hard diary like this to do your planning, and I definitely recommend a quarterly planner. You can also do online planning using a cloud-based project management system like Asana. Trello is another good one that I've used in the past. There's a lot of different systems, so test and measure. A lot of these you can use for free. You don't have to pay, you can use them for free and you can test them and get them on a trial. Asana is a classic example of that. I think Trello is also free. So definitely experiment with some of these online cloud-based systems and just test to see what works for you. I've come up with a combination of a little bit online, a little bit offline, and I merge the two together. So you've got to test and measure what works for you. Hey Angela, I did feedback when I was 23. Yeah, feedback is something that you want to embrace every single day. You want to look, the faster and the more frequently you can get feedback, the faster you're going to expand. So I also recommend creating a master list. What's a master list? A master list is where you do a brain dump of absolutely everything in your reality that you need to get done. So this could be shopping lists, this could be things you need to buy, this could be things you need to do, conversations, people you need to reach out to, projects. You want to get into the habit of and I recommend you do this every single morning, is you dump everything out of your mind into one of these little journals. And then the whole purpose of that is to empty your mind of all the clutter and all of the stuff that's just floating around. Somehow, when you actually write your thinking, your processing, when you actually write it down, it's very cathartic and it lets you actually start to join the dots of what's actually going on. Because otherwise there's just lots of random thoughts that are happening. Your reality sometimes is confusing. Sometimes there's a lot of internal dialogue and there's a lot of chaos going inside the mind. So by writing and getting into a habit of completely dumping absolutely everything in your awareness, you are now simplifying. You are simplifying your life and you are clarifying all the things that you need to do. So I definitely recommend having a master list of everything you've got to do. Now, the thing about this master list is you want to resist the temptation to do overwhelm. And the way to do this is to look at your master list as a first draft. So you've now dumped everything into this master list of things that you've got to do. What you now need to do is you've got to get super clear on, well, out of all that stuff that we have to do, what's actually important? This is the core question. This is obviously the first core question I gave you. The core theme was, well, what's our purpose? What's our outcome? The second core theme we need to overlay in our thinking is, well, how now are we actually going to implement that through the lens of what are we going to do first? What are we going to do first? Now, you've got to decide what's the most important aspect of this, because there might be a scenario, and I suspect you guys can probably relate, when you've probably got through a whole day and you've done a whole lot of other stuff that wasn't necessarily important. It was emergencies, it was putting out fires, it was just stuff that came along and just distracted you, and then you've now looked at your to-do list, or you've looked at what you were going to do for the day, and you haven't done it. Well, that's a classic example of where distractions just come and ambush you and completely obliterate the plan that you had. Well, the key theme here needs to be, what's your number one priority? What is your number one priority? What's the most important thing you have to get done today, this week, this month, this year? What's the number one thing? And you've got to get super clear on the priority. Life is about priorities. When you become clear about your priorities, you become empowered because you're now focusing on what's important. You're focusing on what's going to move the needle. You're focusing on what's in alignment with what you truly want to experience. So you've got to get clear on what are your priorities. Now, one of the best ways of prioritizing, and there's thousands of ways of prioritizing, but I'm going to give you my favorite way, and that is an A, B, C, D, E system. So this is simply when you've got your master list of all of your tasks, all of your projects, you now want to go through and categorize them. Right? So you look through your list. If you wanted to do them all at the same time and you feel like they're all equally important, then yeah, you're going to probably feel overwhelmed. You're probably going to feel like, how am I going to do all this? When am I going to do it? Is it all equally important? The answer is no, it's not all equally important. A is the first of these 5 different ranking systems. A means it's highly important, really important, which means you've got to do it. B means, well, it's not so important, but you should do it. So it's kind of like a medium level of importance. C is, okay, it would be nice to have it done, but not essential. D would be, I don't really want to do this, I'm going to delegate it. And then E would be, I'm going to eliminate it because it's just completely not important. I'm just going to draw a line through it, not even going to bother with it because it's not important. So we've got to get ruthless with how we're approaching our priorities. Our priorities are everything. And if you're not clear on your priorities, another word for priorities is your core values. If you're not clear on your values or your priorities, then you've got no criteria for making decisions. You've got no criteria for making intelligent, wise discernments about what's your approach, what's your strategy, what needs to get implemented first. So use that system. Use that system to begin with. Now, there is so many other systems. There's urgent and not urgent. There's important, not important. There's ranking systems. You could use numbering systems. There's all sorts of systems that you could create. I recommend starting with this one. It's a basic system, but it works. So I definitely recommend experimenting with that system. So once you've now gone through that master list and you've now ranked all of your projects, all of your tasks, what's the priorities, you've now got something to work with because you can now look through those and go, okay, well, based on my master list, I now know what my priorities are. So you can now filter those. You can rank them. And if you do them in something like an online system like Asana or Trello, it's quite easy to drag these around and actually reorder them and prioritize them. You could also do it in a journal, like in a hard copy journal as well. That's still exactly the same process. So what you're now doing is you're now filtering your tasks through the lens of now what's important. You also want to now start to consider how much time is required for each of these elements. Each of these little subtasks, it's going to take time. You need to know how much each of these elements is going to take. As I said before, we launched our project where we're creating a podcast. Now, we did an estimate of that, and there was like dozens of hours involved in creating the podcast. So we needed to break that down into little sub-elements of who was going to do what, when it was going to happen. Because otherwise, if you just write create podcast, well, that's just a huge, undefinable blob of stuff that needs to happen. So it's disempowering to not know how long that's going to take. Whereas if you can say, right, it's going to take 36 hours and we're going to space that over the next 6 weeks. So that means we're going to need this many hours per week. It becomes manageable. So it's the same thing with your week, your month, your year. When you break it down into little chunks, you can actually see that it becomes doable. You can slot those chunks in to your week or your month or your year. Very, very powerful process when you can start estimating what's the amount of time it's going to take. And yes, you're not necessarily going to be perfect in your estimations of tasks. It's always a best guess, and you will evolve and you'll improve your estimates as you go. But I definitely recommend putting a time estimate on how long that task is going to take you. And I recommend even playing a game with yourself. And I do this all the time. I get my phone out and I say, right, I reckon, for example, I wrote an email today. I wrote my weekly email that goes out to my mailing list. For those of you that are not on my weekly mailing list, drop a comment below and actually just go straight across to the Chris Jackson Coaching website, chrisjacksoncoaching.com, and sign up for my VIP newsletter. That newsletter, I set myself 1 hour to do that newsletter. So that's where I distill all of my knowledge and wisdom into an email. Now I wanted to set myself 1 hour, and I set my timer going, so I could see my timer in front of me. So I knew that I was on the clock. I created pressure for myself in a very healthy, competitive way. Not a judgmental way, not if I don't get this done, Chris, you're a douchebag. It's great, let's actually get this done on time and let's deliver this. So I set myself an hour and I did it in about 50 minutes. So that was great. Awesome. So it's like I won that game. I won it. So you've got to set your life, your business up so that there's a series of little games that you can win. So the more playful, the more competitive you can, in a playful way, the more competitive you can get with yourself, it just turns this whole experience of life into a much more enjoyable experience. So that's what I definitely recommend playing around with. So using a timer is really powerful because it creates time pressure. Now, there is a phenomenon that exists, which I believe is called, it's not Murphy's Law. There is a law which is around whatever time we nominate to do a particular task. If we are not under any particular time pressure, then we will take that amount of time. So for example, if I gave you a week to come back and do an assignment or an essay, you'd probably take a week to do that. Whereas if I said it's due tonight, you'd do it tonight. So, and I think it's Parkinson's law. It's Parkinson's law. And so Parkinson's law says that we will take the amount of time that we nominate for ourselves. It's just natural human behavior. We will fill the amount of time that we've got to do a particular task. That's just the way it goes. So Parkinson's law, use it to your advantage. So give yourself discrete little elements of time to commit to follow through on everything that you're looking to create in your life. And you'll find that it just happens far more quickly. Thanks, Charmaine. You just got told to use the other day to use a timer to stop procrastinating. Yeah, when you use a timer, you create time pressure. You create awareness of time. And for a lot of us, we forget that this is so precious. This is so limited. And again, it's not judging time or being impatient. What it's doing is it's valuing our time. So we need to value our time and be accountable for every hour that we're spending in our life. Where is that time going? And in addition, we also need to be very, very clear on what are we saying yes to and what are we saying no to. This is another core part of planning, is looking at your to-do list, looking at your projects and saying which projects are in alignment and which ones are not in alignment. So again, the things you say no to are just as important as the things you say yes to. So my question for you is, what are you going to say no to? I challenge you to just look at your calendar, look at your life and get ruthless, get radically honest. What do you want to eliminate? What have you got to get rid of? Hey Carmel, good to see you here. What have you got to say no to so that you're honoring yourself to the highest degree? Because if you're anything like how I grew up thinking that saying yes was being polite. I grew up thinking that just saying yes to people and meeting other people's emotional needs was a loving thing to do, was the polite, nice thing to do. Well, it's not. It's not honoring yourself. It's not you being the highest expression of your truth. So you may have to get confrontational. You may have to get ruthless with what you're saying no to. And I'd recommend test it out. Start this week. What can you say no to? So that is going to be a principle that is going to radically transform your experience when you start getting more comfortable with saying no to the things that are just not important, things that are just not serving you. So there's so many principles here you can see that get overlaid over this whole context of planning. So what we're going to take a look at now is some little elements here that kind of complement the whole planning process, but make a massive difference in the amount of time that you can save. Now, first of all, you want to eliminate all the distractions. You want to eliminate as many distractions as you possibly can. Now, this includes turning your phone off. I recommend not checking your phone for the first 2 or 3 hours of your day. Get your phone out of sight. Because when you are checking your phone, if you're on social media, if you are on your phone, you are not productive. You are reacting to the rest of the world's agenda. So you've got to get super clued into where is your time going? Where is your energy going? And if your energy is being drained, it's being pulled out of you, you've got to do something to eliminate the distractions. So turn off your phone. Learn to say no to what's not serving you. Turn off your notifications on your phone. Turn off your email notifications. Turn off everything. Close your door. Put a sign up in front of your door. No distractions. This is critical. So don't check your phone. Don't check your email. The most important thing here is if you are working undistracted, i.e. if you are totally 100% focused, then you're going to be totally empowered to get your tasks done so much more quickly. As soon as you get distracted, it's like, you know what it's like. If the phone rings, you get distracted and then you've got to try and go back to what you're doing. You can't even remember what you're doing. So you've got to really remember that by you being not distracted, i.e. by you being focused, that's your access to high performance. That's your access to getting more done. So sometimes it's not about hustle, 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 more. Sometimes it's just about just eliminate the distractions. So remember to say no to the things that are not serving, and remember to just switch off the distractions, switch off your notifications, switch off email, switch off everything that is not serving you, and stop responding to the emergencies of things in your environment, and start to reclaim your sovereignty and own your reality by choosing what do you want to focus on. I recommend, and I've mentioned this before, I recommend keeping a misalignment journal. Your misalignment journal is a journal where you document all the distractions. You document all the areas where you were procrastinating, where you're out of alignment, where you were fearful, where you had some kind of limitation come up for you, and document that. You review that. That happens as your daily review process. So at the end of your evening, you're now reviewing where you're out of alignment for the day. Where were you not at maximum productivity? Where were you distracted? And then course correct and implement something the next day that's going to prevent that from happening again. So this is now about radically learning really quickly and applying so that you can transform your experience and improve your productivity. So there's some really simple techniques that if you apply these consistently in your approach to how you plan your day, your week, your month, your year, you're going to notice a profound difference across all the different dimensions of your life, because you're now reverse engineering and redesigning your life based on priorities, based on intelligent thinking, based on wisdom, based on all the hacks that have been discovered through the history of time. These are the best hacks that you're going to find around really radically transforming your productivity and your management of time and your management of self. And this whole conversation is about improving the amount of impact that you've got. We have a limited amount of time. We don't have forever. So this conversation really is about how do we extract the most out of the time that we've got, and caring so much about our life that we are willing to be ruthless, being so transparent, so honest with ourselves, and say no to absolutely everything that doesn't serve us. So I trust that was beneficial, guys. I trust that was useful. I trust there were some little hacks and nuggets of wisdom in there that you can apply straight away in your life. As I said, I recommend daily planning. As a minimum, you want to be planning your day the night before. You want to be reviewing your whole day the morning before you start your day. You want to be working from a list always. You don't do anything unless it's on your list and you've consciously decided to work from that list and it's prioritized and you've deliberately scheduled it in. And then you also want to review your day at the end of every day as well to capture all the misalignment, to capture the learnings. So definitely move towards daily planning. I also recommend moving as a minimum towards weekly planning, and then I'll speak more in some upcoming episodes about monthly planning, quarterly planning, and yearly planning, which adds a whole nother layer of depth to strategic planning for anyone's life or your business. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for your comment, Mike. Yeah, thanks Angela, thanks Mike, thanks Carmel. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Yeah, let us know if you've got any other questions, comments, things you want to hear more of, things you want to hear less of, any specific topics. Always love to get your feedback on what you're loving about Transformation Tuesday. As always, guys, lots of love, wishing you a fantastic week, and I will see you again next week for an episode on how to improve your confidence. Until then, much love. I'll see you soon.